Hello and welcome back to the channel. What a glorious day it is today. It's about 15 degrees, which is just absolutely lovely. It means I can really turn my attention to this bike and hopefully get quite a lot done now the weather's turned. I have taken the calipers off the bike because they, in the last video or the previous videos, the front brake was actually binding quite badly, and you just can't have that. So the calipers have been taken off and they're in the workshop ready to be stripped. So in this video today we're going to get those all apart, get them all fully stripped down and work out exactly what is going to be needed to get it all back up and running. So when they do go back on, we're going to have good brakes, but also more importantly, this wheel won't be restricted, so the bike will just generally ride nicer. We're not going to be heating up the discs when we're riding, and all in all, how it should be. So I think what we'll do is we'll get into the workshop, tear into it, and have a little look. So it's a little bit unorthodox the way that I do this, and some people will probably say there's all better ways, and you can use air and you can do all these other things. But what I tend to do is keep the brakes completely set up as if they were on the bike, so I have the ability to be able to actually pull the lever, and then I work a caliper at a time. And what I'm going to do is release the actual pads out of the caliper, so I've got a bit of space. I've got a very small little G clamp which I put on one piston, and then I'll pump this, or pump the master cylinder, so that I can actually start to get one piston out at a time. And I get it around about halfway, and then what I'll do is reverse the clamp and get the other piston to meet in the middle, so that they're significantly the way out. And then once they've met in the middle, I'll then do the same process on the other caliper till they meet in the middle. I might need to top off the reservoir just to get a bit of extra liquid in there, and then that means that when I do separate the calipers, that the pistons are almost all the way out. And then if you then need to, you can then use air and whatever other bits and pieces. So it's a bit of a process, but it's how I've done it and how I've done it in the past. I've already got the pads to meet in the middle anyway, so if I now take these pads out, they are relatively loose. I can then inspect the pistons. They all look in good order actually, they're just very, very dirty, and I should imagine there's a little bit of corrosion sitting in the seal, which is causing the piston to be tight. By taking the seals out, removing any corrosion in there, putting new seals and refitting is generally all you need to do, with a good clean and a change of the liquid. So first thing you're going to do is remove this top plastic cap, or cover should I say. It can be a little bit tight. Okay. And then I've got the pins that I need to take out. And the way this is done is there's a couple of little, I don't know if you can see here, but there's a couple of little clips that just need to be removed. Sometimes you can just do them by hand. This one has sort of got itself a little bit stuck, so I might need a little pick tool or a little screwdriver just to release that. So whoever put that in, they put it in a little bit wonky and it's bent it, so I'll probably need to replace that. I think I've got a spare somewhere on an old set. Now it's a case of pulling the pins out, and in this case they're actually really free. So you can just use a little small screwdriver or a bradawl just to knock them out. Then it's always best practice to drop the spring, drop this cover that pings off and drop it on the floor and lose it. That's a good idea. And then push the other pin out, and then we'll just clean those up and make them look good. Now the pads themselves will just drop out the bottom of the caliper. Now at this point we can now see the pistons for all their glory, and yeah, they are a little bit gummy, and there's a little bit of weepage there, so it's possible that the seals are about to let go. So I think this is really good that we're doing this today. So, got a very small little G clamp, not particularly big, but it's perfect for this application actually. And as I say, there's probably other ways of doing this. This is the way that I'd tend to do it. I'm just going to loosely put this on. It doesn't need to be tight at all, but it just needs to be sufficient so A, it doesn't fall out, and it just doesn't allow the piston. So very, very loose, not on there very tight. And now just simply by pressurizing, you can now see that lower piston starting to move outwards. There we go, we're now up against the G clamp. You can move the G clamp back slightly, so it's very loose, it's not tight, just to get a little bit more out of that piston. So it's roughly in the middle, and that's perfect. And then what we'll do, so I'll just put clamp on this side now. As I say, only light, doesn't need to be much. And then we'll do that again. This time the other piston should meet. That's roughly where we want to be. So we're at a point now where they're roughly meeting in the middle, and we're in a good place now to be able to separate this and get this out with relative ease without having to worry too much about damaging the piston itself. So the piston itself looks to be in quite good order actually. There's no scratches that I can see or anything like that, so I think they'll clean up really, really well. So I'm just going to do the same now to the other side. And then once we get them to the point where they're in the middle, I'll then be happy to then separate the brake lines and then split the calipers in half, so we can then look at each individual side and get everything all cleaned up. But that's how I do it. I know there's other ways, and I know people go, oh, that's not the way to do it, and you need to do it this way and that way, but that's how I do it, and it's always worked for me. It just means that I'm not having to put too much stress on these pistons, so that's just the way I do it. So do the other side and we'll be back shortly. Perfect, so you can now see both pistons, both sets of pistons are now meeting nice and square in the middle, just where I want them to be. So I can now undo these, and what I typically tend to do is put both the pipes into a zip tie bag and then just seal it off, and then place this right out of the way somewhere so I can just work on the calipers individually without getting too much brake fluid absolutely everywhere. So it's a 12mm bolt. I have I did slightly loosen these before taking the calipers off, just to make sure that I wasn't going to be fighting them on the bench, so I haven't got too much to worry about. And then it's just a case of trying your best to eliminate as much of the mess as you can. And what I tend to do is just unscrew the banjo and drop it straight in to the bag. Put the caliper upright so you don't lose or leak the fluid everywhere. And then we'll do exactly the same with the other side. So just trying your best to not make too much mess, because this stuff gets everywhere and it's also quite harmful to paint, so you don't really want it on any getting anywhere near any freshly painted surfaces or painted surfaces, because it will strip paint quite well. We will be replacing all of the O-rings. For now, I'll just get a little cable tie and find one. it around the bag. It's not 100% guaranteed you're not going to leak, but it stands the best chance. And then we'll just remove this now completely out of the way as a sealed system and clear the bench. Perfect. So we've got some fluid in the calipers, and what you can do is get yourself a little container or something to deposit the old fluid into so we can safely dispose of it. So we'll just pour that, as much of that out as possible. You're not going to get all of it out at this point. When you separate the calipers, that's when the bulk of it will then release. So that's got some of it out at least. Another way to release it is we can actually undo the bleed nipple. So at the moment there's like I suppose a vacuum in there. So we'll have a quick go at releasing that bleed nipple. Let's see how well that undoes. Okay, that's good, that's undone all right. So now by removing that completely, you should get a lot more liquid out. There you go. So we can, always worth inspecting the liquid to see if there's any debris in there, and this looks pretty clean to be fair. So I think the brakes were working very well, but just because of lack of use, I think it's just sat in a colder environment, and it's just, you're going to have corrosion inside the channels that the seals sit, and that's the objective here, is to clean all those up, put new seals in, polish up the pistons. Don't think I'm going to need to paint them. They look all right, to be fair. I might blow them over. I don't know yet. But the bolts themselves, I will either replace or we'll clean these up and we'll treat them, just so it looks a little bit nicer when back on the bike. Perfect. So I'll do the other side, and then we'll split the calipers and take a little look. Easiest way I've found to separate the calipers, you don't want to do it really on the bike. Start undoing these bolts. You could do, I suppose, one at a time, then retighten. But I find it's just easier to either put this in a clamp, in a vise, and then crack them off with a breaker bar or something like that, or just use a little pack just to break them apart. Shouldn't take too much effort. There we go. And then the bolts are withdrawn. I can clean all those up and make them look good. And then should now be in a position where we can separate these two. I'm just going to pop a little bit of tissue down just to get any residual. It's separated quite easily. There is a little O-ring that sits here and here, which kind of seals the two halves together. So you don't need to make sure this surface is clean as possible, but then when you get the seal kit that goes where the piston is, you do get these new O-rings. So we'll just pry those out with a little pick tool just to make sure that they're removed. And you'll see that there's a way here that the fluid can sort of travel between the two halves. So when you bleed them up, the fluid can kind of transfer from one half to the other half. Now it should be now relatively simple, hopefully, and it is, because we were right on the limit of where that was holding, to now take your piston out. And that came out really nice and easy. So we'll take that one out. Hopefully we can get this one out too. It's not always easy, I will stress. This one is putting up a little bit of a fight. So we'll move that one to one side for the moment. Just make sure we've got all of this brake fluid out, because a bit more's come out. Just trying to eliminate making a mess, really. And we'll have a little look. You see, what I don't want to do is apply too much pressure, so I'm just wiggling it from side to side, and there we go, that's now come out as well. So I'm very happy that they've withdrawn nicely. Now they look a bit grubby, You'd expect that. They've been in the bike probably quite a while. A quick clean up with some towel. Let's see how they look. But yeah, actually they're not too bad at all. They were a really good order. So there's no corrosion that I can see. There's a bit of a shine where they've been sat, just there, but nothing that I can't polish out. So I will polish those on my bench polisher. I'm not going to use anything at all that's going to scratch the surface, so I won't use any kind of wire or anything like that. It will just be a compound polish to make them look as nice as possible, and they'll clean up just fine. So I've got no worries there. This one, you can see a little bit of tiny bit of corrosion there, but nothing at all, and once again that will clean up just magic, and then they'll be perfectly usable. Then we've got the caliper half, and you can now see there's a inner dust seal and a inner seal. Now this inner seal is the bit that stops the brake fluid from actually pushing past the piston. It also what gives it a seal so that the piston can actually pull in and out. And what tends to happen is you'll get a build-up of aluminium corrosion on the inside of that seal, which pushes the seal out. By pushing the seal out, or making the seal technically smaller, makes the piston tighter. With a tighter piston, ultimately you're then going to get your brakes potentially binding, which is what has been occurring. So, you know, we'll clean up a little bit of this. I'm going to use my little pick tool again, just to liberate as carefully as possible. And you don't really want to be scratching anything here. As carefully as possible, just lift out the little dust seal, and then same again for the main seal. Okay, and then we can now take a little look at the caliper itself, and to be fair, they are in really good order. So I think with just a basic cleanup, there's not a lot of corrosion at all anywhere here. So just a basic cleanup. I may stick them in an ultrasonic bath as well, just to really make sure they're clean. And I'll get rid of the fluid first, and I'll just show you how I clean it. People have different ways of doing it. There's no heavy soil or corrosion that I really need to worry about, to be fair, on these. They are in really good shape, so I'm really quite pleased. I think just do a new set of seals and a bit of a clean-up, and I think we'll be grand. So once again, very carefully, have a little look at this one. And once again, I am really pleased with what I'm seeing. So I think of a bit of a clean-up. I'm going to clean up now the fluid, make sure they're as nice as possible, clean as possible, and I'll show you how I'm going to just clean up these surfaces. And essentially, it's going to be using a very soft Dremel rotary tool, just to go in that groove and just clean it out. But I won't need to do too much by the looks of it. So cleaning up the calipers, I'm going to use, I've squirted initially a little bit of brake cleaner to get rid of any of the last remaining brake fluid, and I'm using a nylon tipped or nylon brush initially, just to see how well it responds. So I've got my Dremel, and I'm just going to run it round these channels and inside. So now I've done the inside there, I'm just going to now switch to a little steel brush. So you've got to be quite careful now because it's a bit more coarse. And all I want to do is just do these surfaces where the two halves sit, just to get rid of any corrosion there. It's quite an enjoyable process, really. It's quite satisfying doing this, especially when you get a nice end result. Perfect. So you can now see there's a sort of distinct difference. They were clean to start with, but you can see now how clean that is, and that's now ready to receive its new seals. Now, as for the pistons themselves, as I say, I am just going to machine buff these quickly, and I use my my buffing wheel for that. So I'll quickly do that, and I'll show you the end result of how they look when they're done. So with literally about 30 seconds on the buffing wheel, you can see the difference. So they are looking absolutely lovely and really nice condition. So that was before, and that's after, and yeah, night and day. But there's absolutely no visible scratches or corrosion or anything that can be seen. So when they do go back in, as you can see there, they're a really nice, beautiful fit. So yeah, really pleased with that. I think once the new seals are in, we're going to have some good brakes. So what I'll do now, I'll do all the rest, and then we'll be ready to fit the new seals. With the two halves of the calipers all cleaned up, and now my brake kit has arrived from a company called Brake Masters. Really can't emphasize how good this company is. They're not the cheapest, certainly, but you do get what you pay for. I've never had a problem with them. You can send your calipers off to be refurbished with them, but I like to do them myself. But the kits they provide are absolutely incredible, and what you get is the full set for either one or two calipers, depending on what you're doing. You get the new seals, the new caps for the bleed nipples, the little O-rings that go between the two halves, and also the copper washers for the banjos. Now I have previously cleaned up now the little pins, and I've also treated the pins and these bolt heads, because they're going to be exposed to the elements, to something called ACF 50. Now ACF 50 is a anti-corrosion formula that you can apply to bare metal. It's used in aviation and it's been around for years. Buy yourself a big bottle of this because it lasts almost a lifetime in this form. Get yourself a little brush it on, leave it to dry, and you can pretty much leave bare naked metal outside like this and it will not corrode. It's incredible stuff. There's some videos on YouTube, I think, with people sort of demonstrating how it works and leaving an old bolt outside rust, one half treated, one half not, and you see the difference between the two. It's really good. If you're going to winterize a bike, then literally cover your bike in this stuff, and you won't go too far wrong. I say cover, I don't mean the tank and all that stuff, but certainly any bolts, fixings and things like that you want to make and keep looking nice through the winter, then that's the stuff for you. ACF 50, cannot recommend it enough. So how do we do this? We get ourselves the new seal, and we get ourselves a little bit of brake fluid, and we just lubricate the seal. Okay, now this is a square seal, there aren't any tapered edges to this, and I do believe the calipers themselves in the channels are slightly tapered, and this will mean that when the seal gets fitted, which I'm about to do now, and you just literally apply it into the groove, making sure that you're not getting it twisted. And when it gets fitted in, it should just slot into place. You'll notice there's a tapered edge on the inside, which is what you want. So when the piston's trying to push, the fluid is trying to push past the piston, it will meet a wall of the seal, which is exactly what you want to achieve. Then we get the dust seal, and we do the same. Just give that a little bit of a lubrication, and we just slot it in the channel. And it's as simple as that. Just take your time, make sure that when you do fit it, it doesn't twist. Run your fingers along the inside to make sure that everything is sitting exactly as it should, and is in good order. We then get our piston. Wouldn't hurt just to put a tiniest little bit of fluid on that as well, just to lubricate things along. I think you can use the assembly grease for this job too, but I've always just used brake fluid. And then you just push the piston into, get it square if it resists, and it will just push home by hand, nice and easy, until it sits flat and flush. And that's what you're looking to do. I'll just quickly do the other side. I'll be back in a moment. Perfect. That's now the two halves ready to go. I'm just going to give them just a quick wipe, get rid of any of that brake fluid that may well be on the surface. And we're good. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to just put these two little rubberized O-rings into the little grooves here on this side. Now you notice they do sit slightly proud of the surface, and that's by design. So when the two halves go together, and this side's got a flat edge, and when that meets, it's going to form a really good seal, which of course you don't want your caliper leaking brake fluid all over your nicely freshly painted wheels. So we'll just put this last piston in, which I nearly forgot to do. That's it. And then we've got our two halves ready to go. I'll just put a little bit of copper slip on these bolts. So there is a torque setting for these, which I'll put up on the screen now, and it's just a matter of, for the moment, I'm just going to get these roughly there. And then what we can now do is fit the rubber boot to the nipple itself. Make sure that when you get this in, you put the boot the right way so that it can cover the cap or cover the end. And then we just screw that in. I love fitting new parts. It's really satisfying. And that's all good. So next job to do is to fit the pads. And it is just a simple matter of popping your pad either side. I have, say, applied a little bit of copper slip to the back surface of the pads, just to make sure that we don't get any squealing or issues. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of grease to the pin as well, just to make sure that that's a little lubricated. And then we slide our pin in. And then once the pin goes in, you also have to put the this retaining plate, or this little plate, in, and it kind of sits under the first part, the first pin, and then you have to then kind of lever the edge down. Here, look, you can just see that moving down, and then just slide the next pin in, which is why they have a tendency to literally ping off whenever you release these clips or pins or whatever they're called. And that's it, and that's what you're looking to achieve. Okay, and then with that done, you then need to find and locate the little holes where the clips need to go in, circlips or pins or spring clips or whatever they're called. Seem to be struggling for the names of things today. You may need to rotate it round. There we go. So you now see that I've got a hole there, if you can pick it up, and a hole just there for these little teeny tiny R clips, that's what they're called, to drop in on there, and one just there. So what you end up with is your pads sitting as they ought to, ready to receive or go onto the forks, just like that. That's the right way. Yeah, it all looks good. Okay, so I'll now do the other side, and then we'll be ready to fit them to the bike. So I'm now in a good position to fit the calipers to the bike. Now they do have to go the right orientation, so there is a left and a right, and it is actually labelled on the caliper in this case which is left and which is right, so it's quite straightforward. I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of copper slip just on the bolts for the caliper, just so that if ever they need to come off, they're going to be a little easier for somebody. I'm going to hang it from the top bolt first. Now I can put the copper slip onto the second bolt. So just quickly pop the other side on and then we'll be good to go. So when fitting these on, I'm not going to over tighten them. I'm just going to pretty much just nip them up with a little bit of play. So I don't want them to be overly tight. Just so there's a tiny little bit of movement, that's all I'm looking for. So next little job is a little bit messy, so I put a catch bucket down here just not to spill fluid everywhere. And what I'm going to do now is just cut my cable tie off my little bag. Hopefully they shouldn't drain out too much fluid. Just wipe the ends. Because they've been sort of hanging there for quite a while now, there should be nothing to sort of drip out. And have a quick look at the banjos just to make sure that they're in good order. And just give that a bit of a wipe and a bit of a clean. Yep, that's all in good order. So, it's not rocket science really, it's a single washer followed by the appropriate line. So, and they should bend roughly where they would have sat. So looking at the way these are currently bent, I would suggest that one would have gone there. So we'll try that first and see how it fits, and then make sure you put a washer the other side, hence why you get 4, just like so. That's properly visible, but yeah, and then screw it in. Now there is a stop on the caliper that stops this banjo from turning or going any further, I don't know if you can see on the camera here, into the wheel, so that's good. And then there's a clamp that goes here somewhere which will hold this cable in the right position. So I'm pretty satisfied looking at the way things are routed that that's the right side, and when I look at the other side I can see that that would fit quite nicely on the other side too. So I'm happy that these are now in the right orientation for how they were. 12mm. I'll just give that a tighten. Now I've got the calipers fitted, all is good. It is worth noting, and this is really for any bike, is make sure you route your brake cables correctly before you fit everything up. Because if you've bled the system and you've got all your brakes working and you're really happy, you go to rebuild the rest of the bike and then you find that you've routed the cables wrong or the pipes wrong, then you're going to have to sort of separate them all, reroute and rebleed, and it's just an absolute ball ache if I'm honest. So make sure you get this bit right before you do anything else. So bleeding the system, there's many ways to do it. I've found over the years this little kit has served me really well, and all we've got is a little vacuum pump, which I may or may not use depending on how it goes, a little receptacle which is connected to the vacuum pump, a long pipe which is the diameter small enough to go over the bleed nipple and not let anything go past, and I always cut a clean end fresh for every time I do this. Obviously some brake fluid, a screwdriver to get to your reservoir, your master cylinder, and a very good quality 8mm for the bleed nipple itself. Now if you've got brand new bleed nipples like I have, then it's not too much of a problem. But if they're a little bit old and rounded, then you don't want to add to the problem by putting a loose fitting 8mm. But the best quality 8mm you've got is key. So the first thing we need to do is to top off the fluid and start to pump some fluid down to one of the calipers. Now we're going to pick size. It doesn't actually matter because both of the brake pipes are the same length. There's no intermediary teeth to worry about on this, so it should be relatively straightforward. So normally you would go for the longer side first and then the shorter side to top it all off, but you know, we'll just see how we go. So we'll crack off one of the nipples, put the pipe on, top up the reservoir and start to pump through. So give me just a moment to set that up. So another good tip I found over the years is to cover as much of the bike as you can with something around where the reservoir is. Brake fluid is incredibly bad for paint, and it will strip paint quicker than you've even noticed it's happened. So having something to protect your bike or car or whatever it is you're working on, always make sure you can wrap something round and keep this topped off, because what you don't want to be doing when you're bleeding your system is letting this drop below a certain level, because then you're going to introduce air back into the system. So keep an eye on this as we go to make sure that this stays with plenty of fluid in it. Okay. So when you're attaching the pipe to the nipple, make sure you get a really tight fit, and that's why I only ever use this once. Once I pull this off, I'll cut a clean end for the other side. So yeah, tighter fit on there as you possibly can, because what you don't want to be doing is letting air introduce back in. Okay, and then all we've got to do for the moment is just undo that, so that it can allow fluid to pass. And then we're just going to very slowly at the moment we're just going to try and introduce fluid into the system. Double checking for leaks as we go. So what you can also do, if you've got the vacuum, is apply a vacuum by pumping. Because what we're trying to do at the moment is make sure that we get fluid in the system. So by applying a vacuum, you can now see it's starting to draw, and if you can see that, the fluid through. So we'll cap that off for a moment and stop the vacuum. It's nearly emptied the fluid, so we're going to top that off. Now once we've actually got fluid down at the pipe, we're in a relatively good place. So now we can pump, and now we can lock off. So hopefully you can all see it. So we lock it off, pull in the brake lever and then release. Lock it off, release the brake lever, pull back in the brake lever, release, and then lock off. And we're going to continue that process until, in fact I can already see the pistons now starting to move, so You know, it's as simple as that. It's keep going until we get all the air well and truly out of the system. Having got the air out of the calipers, I'm still not able to get the pistons to meet in the middle where the discs are. The main reason for that is there's still air in the system. Now, the way sometimes you have to deal with this is you can either lock off the lever completely and allow all the little tiny micro bubbles to escape, or you can just hold, and I hope you can see this, just hold the lever ever so slightly, just give it a couple of little tiny pumps. It doesn't take a lot, but you can now see all this air escaping. There's quite a bit. It doesn't take much. You just keep doing that and keep doing that, and then slowly what will happen is the actual lever itself will start to firm up. So it can be a bit of a process. And all I'm doing is that. So with every time I do it, I get a little bit of air come out. You just keep repeating, keep repeating, keep repeating. And slowly and surely, slowly but surely, it will start to work. Now there was also a metal plate that sits in here which I had to remove because I really wanted to see why this was happening. But yeah, I hope that helps someone, because that's how in the past I've had to do it. I can now start to see now, with all that air coming out, the pads are now starting to close on the discs. So I'm starting to actually get a break. But I'll keep working on that. So after a fair amount of brake bleeding, I have now been able to get myself a relatively good brake. It will still need a little bit more messing around just to get the last of the air, and I may just tie this off overnight, and any last remaining bits of air that are in the system will slowly work their way out through the top. But I think just taking it for a ride, I think we'll get any last air out. So the brakes, all in all, I'm really pleased. Calipers look smart when they're on. They don't look out of place at all. They're not overly restored. They're just been serviced and been sorted. I've now polished up the front mud guard, the forks, this little section here, and it all just looks really, really nice. And with the few little extra bits that I've painted all around here and inside the frame, just here, hopefully you can see, I think it all just ties in and looks absolutely perfect. So I'm going to slowly work my way through the rest of the bike now, just tidying things up generally and cleaning things up. It won't need a huge amount. And then once that nose cone goes on with the gloss look, I think that's going to really, really look nice. I have also fitted the lower pan on, which I think looks lovely as well. So all in all, very, very pleased with how things are going, and it won't be long, to be honest, before she's ready to go. So thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one.